Hi there. Today I'm going to be going through how we can achieve nested looping in Zapier using webhooks and Python. If you've used the looping by Zapier action within Zapier, you most likely have been frustrated by the 500 iteration limit imposed on this action. So in this video, I'm going to show you how we can overcome this. In one of my previous posts, this Zapier loop array with nesting, I show how we can achieve nested looping in Zapier by using webhooks at either end of our Zap. However, this nested loop in the middle here use the looping by Zapier action, which is restricted to 500 iterations, as I mentioned. In this video, I'm going to show you how we can replace that looping by Zapier action in the middle with a code by Zapier action, where you can either use Python or JavaScript code. And the advantage of this is that the code by Zapier action is no longer limited to doing 500 iterations. You can define your own for or while loop within your code that can run for more than 500 iterations. However, there is the constraint that each Zapier step is limited to a 10-second timeout. So the goal here when you're using your code by Zapier action to do looping is to do as many iterations as possible in your Python or JavaScript code in less than 10 seconds. So this is what this video is going to be focusing on. And the next thing I'll walk you through is the Google Sheet we'll be using as an example for this video. So opening up this sheet here, we can see that we've got two columns. We've got a Marketo program column and a period cost column. So all you need to know here is that Marketo is a marketing automation platform, and each of these Marketo programs is associated with a different advertising campaign. And these advertising campaign costs, we want to map these to their corresponding Marketo program, because the Marketo program stores the number of leads created by the advertising campaign. So once we have the number of leads created by the advertising campaign in the Marketo program, and we know how much the advertising campaign cost, we can generate a cost per lead. So therefore, the goal of this video is to find each of these Marketo programs and update them with their corresponding advertising campaign cost. And for the purposes of this video, imagine that there are more than 500 Marketo programs in this sheet that we want to update. I've only got 26 here, so imagine that there's more than 500 rows. And to show you what the desired output is, I'll show you the Marketo program period cost submissions tab to show you what format we need this data in to send it to Zapier so that Zapier can start iterating over all this data and updating the Marketo programs. So the desired output is that we want to join all the advertising campaign costs together using the asterisk character, and we want to join all the Marketo program names together using the asterisk character. And then we are going to start a log so that for each program our Zapier workflow goes through and updates, we want a log to see if the update was successful or not. And then we have a timestamp value here, and we send this timestamp to Zapier using a webhook so that Zapier knows using the timestamp which row it needs to pull the costs and the programs from. So this is the desired output of this data, and the way we get it there is using a Google script. I've included this Google script in the blog post here. So if you scroll down and you click on this Google script link here, it will bring you to GitHub, where you can copy and paste all of this code. Then come to your Google Sheet, go to Extensions, App Script, and then you will automatically be given an empty script here. So then just paste in all the code we got from GitHub. And now I'll explain what this code is doing here so that if you need to modify it for your own Google Sheet, you can. So the first thing we are going to do here is hit save. And we can rename this to be the same as the function here. Let's just call it set values. And then it saves automatically. So the first thing we are going to do is that we are going to get a reference to the active sheet. So this Google script is going to be triggered when we press this button, and I'll show you how to create this button and associate it with this Google script later on. But when we press this button, we are going to be in this sheet. So this is going to be the active sheet. So this gets a reference to the active sheet where the submit button is pressed. Then we get the last row in this sheet. And then once we have this last row, we use it to get all the values in the Marketo program column and the period cost column. So we can see here that we are using the get values function, and we are getting the range from A2 to A and then the last row. So we are getting from A2 to A26. And then the exact same for all the cost values. We are getting all the values from B2 to B last row. So we're getting all the values from B2 to B26 here. And we are storing the cost values in the cost values variable, and we are storing all the program values in the program values variable. And then we are going to join all these different cost values together using the asterisk character. So we're going to take each of these 26 values and join them together using the asterisk character and do the same for the Marketo program. So then the output of what these two variables looks like is something like this. And I'll zoom in a lot here for you guys, where we have all the values in the 26 rows joined together with the asterisk character. And then going back to our script, the next thing we do is we get a reference to the Marketo program period cost submissions tab, which is this tab here. And then we use the get last row function to find the last populated row in this sheet. And then we add 1 to get the next available empty row. So the get last row value will get 4 in this case. And then we add 1 so that we can get the next available empty row. And then once we have this reference to this Google Sheet, we then use this reference and the first available empty row value to get references to these 4 cells where we are going to store the timestamp, period costs, Marketo programs, and the log. So we get these 4 references to those 4 cells. Then we create a timestamp variable, which just stores the current timestamp. And then we use these references we created up here to set the value of these cells equal to the timestamp value, the cost string, which we calculated up here, the program string, which we calculated up here, and we populate the log value with the timestamp and then just a colon because we're going to populate this later on using our Zap. So then once we do this, that will populate these cells with this kind of output. And then the final part of this Zap is that we are going to send a webhook to Zapier, giving it the starting index of 0 and the timestamp so that it can look up the correct row it needs to pull the data from using this timestamp value. And the URL that we use here is the URL that we copy from the catch webhook action in Zapier. So we copy this in, and then this is the value we would paste in here. And then once we send this webhook to Zapier, then that will start the nested looping process within Zapier to iterate over all of the values we have sent it and to update all these Marketo programs with their associated advertising campaign costs. Now let me show you quickly how we can associate this Google script with a button. So if we go to this tab here, the way we do that is we go to Insert, Drawing, we go to Text Box, we draw a text box, format it any way we want, and then we go Save and Close, and then we can drag it to where we want it. And then the way we associate a script with the button is by right-clicking it, and then we click these 3 dots, Assign Script, and the value we paste in here is the name of the function, which in this case is set values. So we paste this in here and then we go OK. So now once our marketing operations team has reviewed that this sheet is set up correctly and we are ready to send the information to Zapier so Zapier can start looping through it, then we just press this button here and we can see that it'll start to run the script. If it's your first time running the script, then you'll need to give it permission to do so. And then what that'll do is it'll run the script. We'll get a new row populated here that will look similar to this with a timestamp, period cost, Marketo programs, and a log. And then that'll send it to Zapier and Zapier will start the looping process. Okay, so we send Zapier the timestamp and a starting index of 0. So now let's jump to a flow diagram to see how everything is set up before I show you how things are set up within Zapier. So our Google script, once we press the button, will send the webhook to Zapier with the starting index of 0. And then we are going to use our Python loop to loop through a certain number of Marketo programs. Then if there are still more programs to iterate through, we are going to send another webhook and we are going to update the starting index to wherever the Python loop finished off from. So if the Python loop did 100 iterations this time, this webhook will send the starting index of 100 back to the top here. And then the next time we go through the Python loop, it'll start from 100 and do another 100 rows. If there are still more rows to do, then we're going to send another webhook. And this time, this webhook will set the starting index to 200. And then the Python loop will go from 200 to 300 the next time it runs. And then we repeat this process until there are no more iterations or no more rows for the Python loop to update. And then in this case, the Zap stops at this point. It does not progress to sending this webhook, and the entire Zapier workflow comes to an end. So now let's take a look at how things are set up in Zapier. So as I mentioned before, we've got this catch hook action here. So let's pull in the latest webhook that we sent from our Google Sheet. So then here we can see that the starting index is 0 and we have the timestamp of our latest submission. So then in this next Google Sheets row, we're using the lookup spreadsheet row action. And in this action, we are specifying the spreadsheet and the worksheet we are interested in. The lookup column we are using here is the timestamp column. And then we are looking up the timestamp that was provided to us from the webhook. So then if we go to continue here and we test the action, we can see that using this timestamp, it pulled in all the information that we need to iterate through. So in this lookup column here, it used the timestamp that we sent to it in the webhook, and then it pulled in these values. So then the next part of this is we just have a nested loop within a code by Zapier action, and we've defined our nested loop in Python. And we specify the starting index to let this script know, okay, we want you to start from index 0 because this is the very first time the Zapier workflow is running. The next time we come in, this starting index will be updated, so the script will start from further along in these arrays than it started from the first time. And just to remind you about why we are doing nested looping here, as opposed to, you might be wondering, why don't we just loop through all 1,551 rows in this Python loop? And the reason for that is because, as I mentioned, although the code by Zapier action is not limited to 500 iterations like the looping by Zapier action, it is limited to a 10-second timeout. So the objective here when you are defining your loop in Python is to do as many iterations as possible within 10 seconds. And then once you've done all those iterations and there are still more iterations to do, then we'll come back the next time. We'll start from further along in the arrays, and then we'll do another bunch of iterations and continue in this fashion until all the iterations are finished. So in this script here, I found that updating 20 programs at once could complete comfortably within 20 seconds. So this script here, and in case you are interested in it and you do actually use Marketo, I include the link to this script in the blog post here under the Update Marketo Program Period Costs section. So you can copy the Python script from here. So this will update 20 programs at once, and it'll update all those advertising campaign costs in the Marketo programs, as I mentioned before. And the script you can see here also updates the log as to whether the update to the Marketo program was successful or not. It also updates the index to let us know where it finished off and where we need to continue from the next time we come into the Zapier workflow. And it also sets a value here to let us know, okay, have we gone through all the values that are in the Google Sheet? If we haven't, then finished will be equal to false. If we have, then finished will be equal to true. And we'll use these later on in the filter that we define here in step 5. Then in step number 4, we are going to update the log cell with the latest log from the Python code in step number 3. And an important thing to note here is that you should only include necessary information in this log because Google Sheets has a 50,000 character limit for single cells. So if you have too much information in here and you're looping through a lot of rows, then you might get there was an error writing to your Google Sheet error. So just ensure you're only including necessary information here. And I also recommend that once you do have this output log, use a JSON formatting tool like the one I've linked here. And then you'll copy your log. You'll paste it in here. And then you'll go process. And what it does is it just formats everything very nicely. So instead of you having to try and look at it in Google Sheets where it might be hard to look at and analyze like this, in the JSON formatter and validator, it tidies it up very nicely for you. So it's very easy to see, yes, this program was updated successfully with all the necessary costs. This one was also updated correctly, and so on. So I recommend doing that to make looking at the output log a lot easier. And then in step number 5, this filter only allows the Zap to progress if the finished value that we calculated in the Python step here is equal to false. So if there are still more iterations for us to do, then this code sets the finished value to false, and then we will progress through this filter to step number 5 here. And then we can see that the index we are going to send to the top of the Zap to restart the process is now equal to 20. So the next time we go through our Python code, it'll start from row 20 and go to row 40 and update all those Marketo programs. And then we also send it the timestamp so it can still look up the correct row in this sheet the next time it comes into the Zapier workflow. And then this URL that we use here is the exact same URL that we copy from here. And then when the Zap runs, let's go retest action here. It's going to send this new index to the top of the Zap. And we get our new starting index. So we pull in the exact same row from the Google Sheets as before. However, now in our Python code, the index that we start at is now equal to 20. So then this Python code will go from row 20 to row 40, update all the Marketo programs with the advertising costs that are in these rows. And then we'll update the log again to show that we've successfully updated another 20 programs. So we'll append to the log. We've already got the log populated with the results from the first 20 rows. Now we're going to append the results from updating these next 20 rows. Then if there are still more rows to complete, we'll come through this filter, and then we'll send another webhook to restart the Zap. But the next time we come in, the starting index here will be equal to 40, and then our code will go and update all the Marketo programs with their costs from rows 40 to 60. And we will repeat this process until we have iterated through all the rows. We will repeat this process until we have iterated through all the Marketo programs and costs that were joined together in these two different arrays. And then finally, once there are no more programs to update, then the Zap does not progress past the filter in step 5 here, and the whole workflow terminates. And once the workflow is finished, we can come into this sheet here, and as I showed you before, we can take this log and view it in a JSON formatter and validator to make sure that all the programs were updated with their costs successfully. And if there are any errors, I've included a link to the Zap we use here just out of convenience, because if you come in here, you don't have to go searching in Zapier to find the correct Zap. It's very easy just to click on this link and go directly to the Zap, so I recommend you do that. And I forgot to mention here that in the Python code, we read in the log as well from this row. So the very first time we come through this code, we update the log to contain all the information related to updating the first 20 programs. And then the next time we come in and we restart the whole nested looping process, the log value will be populated with what's already in the Google Sheet. So the first time we went through, we updated the log in the Google Sheet with the information from the first 20 rows. So when we come back into our Python code here and we pull in the log value from the Google Sheet, this will already contain all the information from the first 20 rows. So then in the code here, we're just going to add all the information for the latest 20 rows. And then the next time the whole nested looping process starts, this Google Sheet cell, thanks to step number 4 here, will already contain the log information for the first 40 programs. So then when we are updating the log variable here, we are just adding the information for the latest 20 programs onto what exists for the original 40 programs. So I hope that makes sense about how we continually pull in the latest value of the log from the Google Sheet and then add to it here within our Python code. And there you have it. That is how we can achieve nested looping in Zapier using the code by Zapier action. And as I mentioned at the start of this video, this code by Zapier action allows us to do more than 500 iterations at once. However, it is limited to a 10-second timeout. So the objective here is to do as many iterations as possible within those 10 seconds. And if this was a little bit complicated for you guys with the nested looping involved here in the middle, I recommend taking a look at this Marketo program cloning via API post, because it shows you how you can use webhooks for looping without the added complexity of having a nested loop inside. So you can imagine this is gone, and then you just have a normal loop, and I show you how to achieve this using webhooks. So take a look at this stripped back example, which should be a lot easier for you guys to understand and help you grasp the concept of how to loop with webhooks. And then at the very end of the blog post here, I link to the Zapier loop array with nesting post that I mentioned before, which will show you how you can swap out the Python code with the looping by Zapier action, which might be a bit easier for you guys to use. And if you need a refresher on the looping by Zapier action, then check out the Zapier for each loop quick start guide, where I go through all the different methods for looping in Zapier. And as always, if you guys found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, then please subscribe. Have a great day.